Should you go audio only or do a video podcast? Well, I'm gonna weigh the pros and the cons of both for you so that you can make an informed decision for yourself and launch your podcast. All right, so let's get into it. Let's start with audio. The pros of having an audio podcast is, well, it's a lot easier to produce. All you really need these days is a computer and a microphone and you're set. Most USB microphones these days are pretty cheap and affordable. Most are starting around $50. You can order one from Amazon today and get started on your podcast as soon as it gets shipped to your house. Also, if you're doing audio only, the amount of platforms available for audio only podcasts in terms of hosting is fairly limited compared to video. So you'd be looking at the big guys like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, on Amazon as well. So if you're just starting out and this is the first time you've ever done a podcast, then audio only might be a good way to kind of dip your feet into the podcasting world. For recording your audio, if you have a Mac, you could easily just use QuickTime and use the record audio feature, or just use some kind of voice recording app. I think Windows has one built in if you're a Windows person. Or if you use Zoom, just use that and just pull the audio from that. So audio only podcast, very simple to get started, very easy, great if you're just starting out. Now, let's talk about the cons. With audio only, it can be tricky to go cross-platform with promotion. Like I said earlier, there's only a couple of options, big well-known options for audio only podcasts. So you're kind of limited in how you market your podcast on other platforms. You can take the audio and make, if you've seen those audiogram videos with like the bouncing waveforms, people do that with audio podcasts. Personally, I don't think they're very engaging. I kind of think they're boring. I'm not really sure if others feel the same way. So while you could do that to promote it across other social media channels, it's not as easy as if you start with video. Which kind of leads me into my next con for this, is that they can be tricky to repurpose. With an audio-only podcast, you can get the episode transcribed and do a blog post or an email newsletter if you have an email list. But there's not a whole lot you can do beyond that. If you start with video, you have a lot more ways that you can repurpose the content. All of these things combined can possibly lead you to slower growth if you're just starting out in the podcasting world. Without ways to repurpose it in different mediums and put them in different places across different platforms, it can be hard to really get a lot of increased traction for your show. I've seen this happen a lot with businesses or business owners. As they start podcasts, they're all hyped about it. They're ready to go and launch and get into it. Weeks go by, maybe a couple months go by of recording and producing, and they're just not feel like they're seeing the traction that they want with their show. They feel like they should have this many more subscribers or this many views on the videos. So slower growth can be a bummer if you're not prepared for it. That isn't to say that an audio-only podcast can't blow up, because obviously there are really popular ones out there. I'm just saying, if you're starting from scratch, you've never done a podcast before, if you choose audio only, path towards growth, really growing your show might be really slow. And there's too many business owners who've quit because they didn't see the results they thought they should be getting. And I don't want that to be you. Really think about which way you want to go here before you jump in. All right, next up, let's talk about video podcasts. So what are the pros on this? You've probably seen a lot of video clips of podcasts already in your social media feeds, and especially even on YouTube, because YouTube has been making a big push over the last couple of years to make video podcasts a bigger thing on their platform. So now we're seeing dedicated channels on YouTube that are specifically for a podcast. You can create a playlist of podcast episodes, designate that as a podcast in YouTube, and it'll populate it within their library of existing podcasts on their platform for discovery purposes. And you may have seen it on YouTube at the list of different video types you're looking for, like the Explore area. There's actually a dedicated podcast spot right there. And YouTube is actually joining the big two. I mentioned Spotify and Apple as being the big key players. And usually when people think podcasts, they think of one of those two. But now YouTube has entered that space and has joined them, making it the big three. Because now lots of people are watching podcasts on YouTube. So with that being said, let's explore the pros. First up, a video podcast is pretty easy to promote across multiple platforms. Because it's video and all social media platforms support video, you can chop up your episode into clips and put those clips everywhere. This can help greatly with podcast discovery across platforms as opposed to audio where you're a little bit more limited. Another pro is, well, I mentioned it before, is YouTube. If you have a video podcast, you can put your podcast on YouTube, either as a dedicated channel or as a playlist in your existing channel. This can also work great for discovery because YouTube is also the world's second largest search engine. And with billions of active users on this platform, there's a greater chance of them finding your podcast on there. And this also makes it really easier for you as the producer of your podcast, because if you already have a YouTube channel, you can easily just get those episodes on your channel. In effect, YouTube becomes your hosting platform. You don't have to sign up for some other new service, create a whole new account, go through this whole dashboard setup onboarding process to get a podcast ready to go on another hosting provider. You can just do it right within YouTube. And if you already have an account and a channel, all you have to do is upload. Now, all that probably sounds really great, and you might be thinking, man, I need to really focus on doing a video podcast then instead of audio. Well, let's talk about some cons, because there are a couple with this route. Number one is there's more setup and gear required. Of course, if you don't really care that much about video quality, a webcam could suffice, or your phone if you want to do that. Then you also need to think about things like lighting. Do you need to buy a ring light or a separate other lighting to put in your space to light you just right so that you'll look good on video? Wherever you're recording from, if it's on video, now people can see your space. So you need to be thinking about the setup, how it looks, how it sounds, that kind of thing. Whereas with an audio podcast, all you need is a mic. You could literally be anywhere. You could be in a closet. You could be in a really messy office and no one would care because they can't see you. The video route forces you to think more about your space and how to optimize it to look the best on and sound the best on video. So there will be a little bit more of a setup and gear focus going the video route. Also, I mentioned earlier about the pro of being that you can promote your podcast across platforms, which is great, but that also means that this could involve more work to make that happen. This will mean chopping up your episode into clips, formatting those in the right way for the right platforms, and scheduling them across however many platforms you want, writing a separate copy and all that for those platforms. It can be a lot of extra work just to get it to be a cross-platform marketing machine. And you might not have that kind of time to do all that yourself, in which case that might mean you would have to outsource that to someone else to handle all of that for you. And even on the production side, there also might be some editing required, since now we're talking video. And then that begs the question of, okay, do you edit it yourself or do you hire someone to do that for you? Point is, there can be a lot of extra work with a video podcast that at some point you may need to outsource some and bring in a team to help you with some of those extra pieces. Whereas with an audio podcast, it's really simple to do it yourself. As long as you have a good sounding mic, you don't really need a whole lot of editing. The option is really up to you, but of course, since I'm a video marketer, I'm going to say video. Yes, it may involve some extra planning and some extra work on your end, and even more of an investment up front. I think the pros outweigh the cons. Video podcasts are becoming so much more popular. Back in the day, it was just audio only. That's all there was. A podcast was something you listened to. But now that's changed to where when you say the word podcast, well, is it audio? Is it video? Is it some combination of those? The lines are getting a little blurred as to what exactly a podcast is. And now with YouTube going into the mix and really pushing video podcasts, I think those lines are starting to become so blurred that it's almost like video will be a podcast. So that when you mention the word podcast to someone, they think a video. And so since I think that's where everything is headed in that direction, I think a video podcast is the right choice because you're future-proofing yourself. But ultimately, you'll need to weigh the pros and the cons for yourself and really see if do you have the time, the money, and the ability to really make this happen. And you really need to think about goals too. Like, is this meant to be a marketing machine for your business, or is it just a place to kind of mess around and have some fun? Figure out what your goals are first, and then from there decide which option you should go, audio or video. I hope this video has helped you weigh your decision a little bit and think through how you want to approach this. If you are thinking about starting a podcast and you've already maybe got a name and that kind of thing for it or a topic, I'd love to hear about it. So just leave a comment below. Tell me about your idea and what you're thinking for your podcast. I would love to take a look at it. And if you need help producing and launching and distributing your video podcast, feel free to reach out. This is Evan with Staehle Media, and I'll see you in the next video.